Thank you. All right. Crybabies. Whiny, needy generation. People that need to be heard. People that need participation trophies. People that like to take selfies. Those that really are just narcissistic, self-involved, stuck in their phone, can't write a check, don't know how to hold a conversation, AKA millennials. For many, when we hear the word millennials, those are the stereotypes and things that we build around a generation. And when we think about that and we build this context, the talk that I'm going to give to you today, we're going to talk just kind of about that consumer, but I want to take that even a step further. And for me, what I like to say is, I'm a proud millennial. And to kind of caveat that, I call myself a pager-wearing millennial. Now, yes, this is a pager for those that are curious. To answer that, no, it does not work. Trying to find a company that will make a pager work in this day and age is very difficult. But I was born in 1981. I'm 37 years old. I did not have Facebook when I graduated college. I actually gave up my EDU address. Facebook came out a couple years later. I couldn't get on Facebook, right? I didn't have an iPhone in college. I didn't even have a phone in college. I had a pager through high school, but then, people kind of looked at that as, only drug dealers had pagers, including my mom and dad who are in the audience. And so for one of those things where, okay, well now what is this, who are these millennials? How does this all work? And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. We're going to take it a step further because interestingly enough, and I'm curious with this audience, did anyone here decide what generation they were going to be born into? No? But we interestingly enough, we judge, we persona, we put people together based on one piece of data, one characteristic that, well, none of us chose when we were born. And so when we think about this and we move forward, I want you to open your mind and change your perspective. And really part of this reason I want you to change your perspective is here's the truth. 73% of millennials in the workforce today believe that they play a critical role in the decision-making process of their company. Like it or not, millennials are the ones that are influencing decisions in the B2B space. Yes, you might not understand them. Yes, you might can't figure out why they're doing those things. Maybe those are your kids, and that's part of the disconnect, right? I'm a dad of 3 girls, but my girls are Gen Z, thankfully, but I learned things from that as well. But 73% believe that they play a critical role. Now, the key word there is believe. If we bring this back to millennials, we are narcissistic. We do believe that our opinion matters. We like to have the megaphone that is social media to tell the world what we ate for lunch and what we're doing tomorrow. But part of this comes down to, okay, we have to shift our perspective, and especially in the B2B space, this is a space that I love. I've worked in B2B my entire life for my career, and a lot of what I was working on was about change and understanding the buying habits, but also understanding that, and this was brought up yesterday in a couple different presentations that I really enjoyed, when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about content creation, are we creating content for ourselves, or are we creating content for our buyers? Are we creating content to please our manager, or are we creating content to please the person that influences the person that swipes the credit card? We need to shift our perspective to understand this generation. And I'm going to walk through that, but just to kind of, for those, some of you are like, wait a second, I'm still trying to figure out where those millennials are. This is actually the Pew Research report that came out last week. So I just updated this on there. But so you can see kind of the generations that are up there right now from a standpoint of what's out there in the market. And I thought this was interesting. The way that they labeled it when it came to transformation and technology is they said you have baby boomers that emerged in the TV era. You have Generation X that was exposed to the computer. You have the millennials that are connected by the internet. And well, you have Gen Z that was born with a Facebook, with an iPhone, that my daughter looks at YouTube pre-roll commercials as the most painful thing that ever existed. And I say, daughter, back in my day, I walked uphill both ways. No, but that element is something to understand and to think about. And this is also interesting as we move forward because for the first time in history, we have 4 generations in the workforce. For the first time in history. And so now we not only have to understand these pesky millennials, but we have to figure out how to bridge the gap. How do we connect with all of these different generations and not only connect with them, but in my opinion, the hardest thing for us to do is capture their attention. And I would actually argue even a step further, maintain their connection, right? Their attention. If you guys were in Lee Oden's session yesterday, Lee Oden was talking about, stop making boring B2B content, right? And part of the thing for what we have to do today is, let's face it, nobody gets excited or wakes up in the morning and says, what's my favorite B2B business posted on social media? Nobody, right? Not one person. And honestly, nobody gets excited when you're promoting your white paper. None of us are like, thank God, another white paper. But what we do want to believe is we want to be able to capture, we want to bring this connection. I'm going to talk to you about how we're going to do that. So it's less about these millennials, and for those of you that are like, okay, millennial talking about millennials, he's loud and obnoxious, he's kind of screaming at us, he talks really fast. I'm going to start giving you ideas on how you can connect with these 73% of the buyers, but I want you to actually take it a step further, and I'm going to take this and say, okay, throw out the generations. Let's think about two different groups of people. The digitally plugged and the digitally unplugged. My dad's here. My dad was in sales, and my dad was the one that I used to say digital dinosaur, but then that kind of was a little bit insulting, not digital dinosaurs, but digitally unplugged. I remember my dad kicking and screaming to get a computer into his peanut brittle business in Norfolk, Virginia. The last thing he wanted was a computer. The last thing we needed was more email. Things are done with handshakes and phone calls. It's about people and trust and community and conversation. And guess what? All of those things still work today, and I would even argue in the digital world we're in right now, we need more of that. We need more human connection. We need more handshakes. We need more conversations. But as we move forward, we have to think, when we're personing this audience, nobody likes being labeled. Nobody. Weirdly enough, like the millennials that are the loudest ones, sure as heck don't like being labeled, but we oftentimes label, but no one millennial is the same. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. My 2 younger brothers couldn't stand social media to save their life. They're not, like my youngest brother actually works for PSAV, the AV company here, and he's big into the technology side, uses social media, but doesn't really think it's valuable, right? My middle brother, he's an architect based here out of Queen Creek, Arizona, and I'm even, look here, I gotta show off, I'm wearing a little Sun Devil love for anyone that is Arizona State piece here. But yeah, there you go, some Arizona State love. But so when we look at this, all 3 of us, my brothers and I are all millennials, yet we couldn't be different when it came to our interaction on social media, our interaction on digital media, even our buying habits on how we research information. But there is elements of this that we have to understand as we move forward. And so I'm going to give you 4 characteristics of today's digitally plugged consumer. And what I want you to think about this is open your mind and say, okay, is this what we are attracting? Are we understanding our consumer? Because I will argue no matter what you look at, you have the American Express example. Tim used the example of Cox Blue. There are some great examples of great B2B website, B2B content, but what they do better than everyone else is they know their customer. They know their customer. I'm going to walk through that. So the first characteristic of today's digitally plugged consumer is disruption and change are the new normal. For many of us in this room, we get overwhelmed by things that are going on, right? I mean, for heaven's sake, nobody wants another social network. I mean, like, we're good, like, even let's get rid of a couple of them. Can we get a pause button on the iPhone updates? Right? I'm addicted. I host a podcast called FOMO Fans, which stands for the fear of missing out. I love bleeding edge technology, but I'm kind of annoyed that I have to upgrade my phone every time, and I say have to. Slightly an addiction to technology. But we're in this world of not only constant disruption and change, but it's in every aspect of our lives. But the digitally connected generation does not care that change is hard, does not care that your business does not want to change. They think it's the norm. And if you're not willing to be agile, if you're not willing to change and adapt, you will become the examples that we always use, which is Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster is a great example. I actually love the new example, especially for those that are under the age of 35, most millennials that don't understand what Blockbuster was. You don't want to become Toys R Us, right? Toys R Us is the new Blockbuster. You stick your head in the sand, you believe that online isn't going to matter. My customers aren't that case. And some of you in this room right now are saying, yes, this is fine. I love that he's talking about that. But my customers are different. Guess what? They're not. Your customers are no different, B2B, B2C, and I would argue B2B right now, from a standpoint of influence, content and social media will oftentimes sway a decision in a B2B consumer more than anything else because there's not many people doing it. If everyone's zigging, you should be zagging. So that first one is disruption and change are the new normal. The second characteristic of today's consumer, community is the future of business. If you understand anything from this presentation, community is everything. Being a part of something, feeling that you belong. And when I say community, community must extend internally to our business, outside to our current customers, and even further to our potential customers. Community matters. People want to be involved and be part of those that are around you. I think when we look at community, we oftentimes just assume it's things that we have to go belong to, but it's about empowering and connecting with that community. And let's face it, the concept of influencer marketing exists for one critical reason. Nobody trusts a brand or a logo. I'm sorry, your brands that are in here, nobody trusts a brand or logo. We trust people that are in our community, that look like us, that have our pain points. I mean, does anyone in here believe that Matthew McConaughey drives a Lincoln? Now, he might have one in his driveway because his contract stipulates that. But as a dad of 3 girls, if I'm purchasing a new vehicle, I'm going to do my research and I'm going to watch a YouTube video for someone that understands what Cheerios are in the back seat. Or a couple weeks ago, I found a yogurt drink in the very back of my Jeep that was a couple weeks old. Yeah, see, the parents like, yep, I know what we're talking about, right? So if Matthew McConaughey is telling me what to buy, he can't relate to my pain points. I believe someone that's in my community. When you travel to a new city or a new town, do you trust a billboard? Do you go to websites? Or do you post on Facebook? Anybody ever been to Scottsdale, Arizona? Where's a great place to get something to eat? We post and we trust our community. Today's consumer look at community for business moving forward. The third one here is that the future of innovation is collaboration. Collaboration is everything. It's no longer about what you know. It's about what you know and your ability to share that with others. Thought leadership, leaders that are out there today, the innovators that we look in our space, oftentimes it's more about what they're doing to empower others to pull together than it is anything else. We can give the millennial generation all kinds of different labels and all different things that are going on, but this generation has one thing and one thing important, that if they know that the greater purpose is what they both align with, they will collaborate, they will share. We are moving into an open API economy. We are moving into the world where it's no longer about Apple innovating in Apple and Amazon innovating there. It's about how do we bridge these two worlds. And collaboration is that key in moving forward. And then the fourth one is, and which is the most important for this room, it's my soapbox, it's the first chapter of my upcoming book. Future of marketing is relatability. Relatability. Everyone in this room, every business is in the business of trust. How do I build trust? How do I scale trust? How do I not lose trust? And let's face it, we're living in a world of fake news, bad news, and I don't even know what the third one is, right? That's kind of the world we're living in today. So these are the 4 main characteristics of this digital consumer that you have to connect with. And so now the question becomes, well, how the heck do I put all of this and then turn it into marketing and sales? Because let's face it, I'm a computer science guy that worked in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense. I did 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. I've been to 74 countries. I love technology. I love innovation. But I love digital marketing and social media for moving a business needle, not for likes and shares and thumbs up. And so when we're thinking about this, now we have to say, how do we fit this into our business? How do we understand our consumer and understand how do we get in front of them? And like I said, the 2 hardest parts for us today is that we have to capture attention and we have to maintain attention, right? My grandfather, rest in peace, my dad's dad, I remember he always would say, he gets his news from 3 locations, right? It was from the newspaper, which I like to call old news or yesterday's news. I know my dad still reads it. Some of you read it, sorry, no offense. The second one was the TV. He had 3 channels, but no remote control in Pittsburgh for change, so really only had 1 channel. And then whichever local watering hole or bowling alley or American Legion. Those were the 3 places that my grandfather would have got news. Today, we have 3,000 notifications on our phone. We have more apps, more disconnections. I mean, nobody watches a TV show now without having a phone out, and they know that because they put the Twitter hashtag on the bottom because they know damn well we're not watching the commercials or not paying attention. We are multitasking. We are distracted. So our question becomes, we have to think like a fan. And those of you that saw David Meerman Scott yesterday morning, David's been a mentor of mine, and he's also someone that I love what he talked about with fandom. And I like to tell him that for me, it works even better than for him. And he's not here today, so don't tell him this. Just kind of keep this here. My last name is Fanzo. Think like a fan, kind of just, falls kind of nicely, right? Fanzo, fan. Think like a fan. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, I'm a diehard sports fan. But when you think about this, what I want to tell you is that you need to put yourselves in the shoes of your consumer and look at it from their point of view. And many of you are like, okay, what does that mean? Most of you in this room have not been to your company's website in 6 months or when you applied for the job. Most of you in this room do not follow your own company on social media. You do not like their Facebook page, you do not follow them on Instagram. If your own employees do not feel it's valuable enough to follow your channels, why the hell would your potential customers? We need to put ourselves in our fans' shoes, start asking our employees, start asking our current customers, where are they at? What are the things that they like? We need to actually create content, conversation, and connection from the point of view of our fans. And I often hear, well, Brian, we're in B2B, maybe we don't have fans. Actually, last time I was here in Phoenix last year, I had a guy shout out and he said, Brian, this is great, but there's no way I can use video or social media. I own a mortuary. And at first I was like, damn. I shouldn't have asked for suggestions. Like I need to, next time, put like parameters around that. I ended up getting with him offline. We ended up doing a 12-part video series of why they love what they do. And funny enough, just like in all of our businesses, a mortuary is about trust. And it's about a time of need. And it's about we need to trust somebody to take care of our loved ones in a time that we don't want to make decisions. And it comes down to it. They do an entire video series all about why they have their business and the things that they do to eliminate risk and mitigate problems. If you're going to just choose when you're in a time of need from a mortuary perspective, the person that you have no idea, you never heard of, or that company that's been creating content talking about why they do what they do, it's a no-brainer, right? And so we have to think like a fan. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of our fans. And our job in the social media digital marketing space, more so than anywhere else, and this goes into ABM as well as offline, anything that we're doing direct mail, we must shrink the gap between ourselves and our consumers. For the last 9 or 10 years or so, we've been using social media and our websites to further ourselves from our consumer. Let's face it, we were like, you know what? I don't need to get phone calls anymore. Let's send them to a website. Then they got to our website, they started filling out our content form, and we're like, well, we don't want just content forms. Let's have something even more fun. Let's have them sign up for an email newsletter that nobody wants, nobody will read, but that way we can at least get them in there, and then we'll spam them with a bunch of messages, and hopefully one of them are going to work. Right? We were using digital social media websites to distance ourselves from our consumer. But today's consumer, more so than anything, we don't trust anything that we don't know, and we want someone to know that they understand us to that relatability. And so our job is to be relatable with what we do online. One of my favorite tactics for that is stop talking with a logo and start talking with your employees. Start leveraging the people of your brand to be the face of your company. If you've ever heard of, anyone here heard of Instagram takeovers? So I work with a lot of B2B brands. I've done some fun influencer marketing work. And for a lot of the B2B brands that I get to work with, I take over their Instagram account and I interview their employees at events in their offices. One of my favorite B2B examples of this is We Are Cisco. Carmen is a good friend of mine. Check out We Are Cisco. Just go to wearecisco.com. They have an entire campaign, social media, content, all across their entire company that their employees run the show every single day. Every day, a different employee takes over their social media account, tells their story, talks about who they are. It originally was designed as an HR play to drive people to apply for jobs. It turned into a marketing play because people realized if I have to choose between two of these technologies, and one of them I have no idea who they are, and the other one I can tell you who their employees are, why employees love working here, what their employees are doing on a day-to-day basis, it was a no-brainer for them. And so when we're thinking about this, we must shrink that gap. We must understand that we are living in this world of content overload. Content overload. I mean, content marketing has exploded. We've heard lots of content marketing conversations, and I loved Tim Washer's session yesterday where he talked about putting empathy back in the conversation. And I was tweeting heavily. One of the things that were, and this is like the universal sign for tweeting. And one of the things he said was, humor is a great way to connect and build empathy through vulnerability, through authenticity. And for me, the light bulb went off because I help brands and businesses tell stories from their digital why and put themselves out there. But it's also about cutting through the noise. And let's face it, we all need more humor in our lives. And unfortunately, for most of in the stand-up comedy world, Instagram has replaced that, where we are going to less comedy shows and doing that. And now, hopefully, we're going to switch that back. But we have to figure out, how do we stand out from the noise? And one of those ways is that today's digital native wants to know that their voice is heard. Now, I will argue, everyone in this room, you don't have to show me a show of hands, but every single generation would have loved to have social media emerge during their prime 20s and 30s. Every generation, baby boomers, Gen Xers, would have loved, every generation wants to change the world. Every generation believes that they're the best generation. I mean, my daughters are telling me that right now. And interestingly enough, it just happens to be that social media emerged in the late 90s, early 2000s, as I was graduating university, I'm the elder millennial, as the younger millennials were getting born. And so when we think about this, we have to understand that, yes, they have a voice, they have a mouthpiece, they have a megaphone that no one else has ever had. But interestingly enough, it's not about solving their problem, it's about acknowledging that they're heard. We understand the difference there? For many of us, we would say, I'm not going to have a Facebook page or an Instagram page because I don't believe my customers are there. And my customers will find me where I'm at. And here's the hard truth of that. If you are not where your customers are having conversations today, they do not think, oh, well, it's okay. They didn't have time to think about us. I'm going to go to them. What they think is, not here, out of sight, out of mind, no longer somebody that I care about. And we have to think about, how do we move this? And it's beyond just online experiences. I work with a paintball company, and it was a really fun experience that we did. And part of that paintball company was they have an offline experience, but one of the things that most people were telling them why the parents were sending their kids to go play paintball, anyone have ideas? It's a sport that doesn't allow them to use their phone. You have to put your phone in a locker, right? And so these parents are like, I can't get my kids off a phone. Let's just send them to a sport, because snowboarding used to be that case. Now you strap a GoPro on your head and you're Instagram storying as you're going down the slopes. Like, we've changed that. And then beyond that, you have to take that and say, okay, well, how do I make these offline experiences something that are enjoyable, something that we can kind of take the next piece? And so I want to say that when we look at content and we look at moving forward, content is not king. Great content is king. Now, here's the caveat to that. We as marketers believe that everything we create is great. I mean, how many people here have either heard someone tell you or your boss has told you, why did we create that viral video that no one watched? Right? A video is not viral because you, the creator, determined it to be viral. A video goes viral because it relates and connects with an audience and they're inspired enough to share. It is not about what we think is great content. Our audience determines what great content is. And so if you want to start thinking about understanding, how do I start making this jump? Part of that shrinking the gap is doing something that might be, kind of innovative and way out there. Ask your customers. Ask them, where's your favorite place to consume content? Do you listen to podcasts or watch videos? Do you read white papers, or would you rather have a white paper read to you on a podcast? Yes, there's a B2B company that I've been doing some work with that's doing a white paper via podcasting. We have to start thinking about, how do we create great content for our audience? The other piece of this is we need to just leave the damn goldfish alone. We've all heard this goldfish, right? The average attention span of today's digital consumer is 8 seconds, the same attention span as a goldfish. We've heard that for years in the content space. Here's the truth of that. It has nothing to do with the goldfish. It has nothing to do with that actual piece. Today's consumer does not have time for crappy content. Perfect example is I binge watched the hell out of some Game of Thrones. House of Cards came out. I decided to take the entire Saturday and watch every episode. Today, we love great content, and we will set aside great content. I listen to 12 podcasts a week on top of hosting 3 podcasts. I spend my time consuming because it's great content. One of the podcasts is called Armchair Expert, hosted by the gentleman named Dax Shepard from Punk'd, and he interviews different celebrities on their vulnerabilities in lives. It's 2 hours long. And you know what I do? I wake up early, and I don't like waking up early. I did it for you guys here. I wake up early on Fridays to get more work in because it drops on Fridays at 2 p.m., and I block in my calendar to consume this podcast. Great content does not matter the goldfish attention span. Now, the hard part of great content is, yes, you can create great content, but now your job is, how do I get it in front of the right audience? And so I'm going to give you a couple tips on doing that, especially in today's day and age. And the first one is, perfection is a fairy tale. If you are trying to create a perfect video, a perfect piece of content, a perfect social media post, and we've all done it, spent an hour and a half writing the perfect post, and then nobody likes it, and we contemplate deleting it, and then we're like, why did we even spend all this time? How did this all work? Perfection is a fairy tale. Right now, what works is real-time, authentic conversations. Today's consumers are craving authenticity. I mean, perfection is such a fairy tale that I misspelled fairy tale. Did people catch that, right? Anyone that follows me and reads my blogs, everyone that I get grammar people that challenge me back all the time. I'm always like, remember, perfection's a fairy. Like I've literally built into my brand that perfection's a fairy tale. So if I screw up, I just use that as like kind of the backup there. But we need to default to authenticity. The other piece of this is we need to give our community a window into who we are. Transparency is extremely powerful. Transparency is extremely scary. For many brands, I've been very lucky to help launch the very first Facebook Live, very first Periscope, very first Instagram, very first Snapchat. For small brands, you might have heard of them like IBM, Dell, Samsung, SAP, the Super Bowl. I worked with them to build their campaigns to go live on Facebook Live, to launch on Instagram. I'm doing an Instagram takeover for Oracle next month at Oracle Modern Customer Experience. If you guys are, some of you I know are attending that event, I'll be there hosting and keynoting there as well. And one of the things, if you think about that and you think about this space that we're in, one of the things that was the hardest part for me to get these brands to use this emerging technology is they had one simple question. What if, Brian, someone asks us a question that we don't know the answer to? And my answer is pretty simple. Say, I don't know. We don't believe that any brand is perfect. We don't believe that any person is perfect. We have to be more transparent with how we put ourselves out there. And if your decision to be transparent happens after you have a crisis, after something goes wrong, it's way too late. If you've been telling your community without really telling them that you don't care, you don't engage with them, you don't comment back on their content, you don't thank people for sharing things, you don't build that trust, and then all of a sudden you leak credit cards, or you get exposed, or you have a Me Too movement in your executive feed, and you come back to your community and say, please forgive us, we care about you. This generation has already unfollowed, blocked you, and removed you from their email box. You have to build that trust, and transparency is scary, but remember, transparency is different than oversharing. We don't care what all of the dirty laundry of your company, but we want to be able to have access and a window into who you are, why you do what you do, and why people work there. And so we have to move forward with this idea of transparency and customizing this. The other piece of this is personalization. And I don't care what generation you are, we all like personalization. And technology and the data and the things that we have available to us right now allow us to personalize everything. If you do not know what your customers are saying about you right now, you're not willing to look. I can tell you, if you don't have someone on your team looking on Reddit, on the technology forums in Reddit, if you are in the tech SaaS space, I can guarantee your company is being talked about on Reddit by anonymous readers, and most of what they're telling is probably the truth. But you have to be willing to look for it. You have to be really willing to personalize that conversation. You have to be willing to ask your audience. And beyond that, you have to be willing to then take their feedback and listen to it. There is nothing worse than a business asking for, what do you guys want? What do you guys like? Oh, what does that customer want? And then we go back to Henry Ford. And what's the old Henry Ford? If I had listened to my customers, I would have invested in faster horses. He would not have invented the car. But in today's generation, today's consumer, we're more connected, we have more information, we have more insights, and guess what? Not only do we think we know what we want, we're not afraid to tell you, and if you give us what we want, we're not afraid to celebrate you, promote you, and tell the world. One of the easiest things for us to do, and this was part of David's presentation yesterday, is turn your customers into fans, your fans into influencers, your influencers into ambassadors. Marketing becomes a lot easier when you allow the people that already love you to do the marketing for you. This also requires us to shift our perspective in how we write content. I worked for a company, a government contracting company, and I did my very first blog in 2005. And I wrote this blog, and I will never claim to be great at grammar. My mom is here, and I struggled through school without question. I loved school. I didn't like the classroom. As you can tell, I was kind of born to talk. I like talking. I like people. The classroom part was a little bit of a struggle. English was a little bit of a struggle. But I was asked to write a blog at BA Systems as my new job. And I wrote this blog, and I had an executive come down to me, and he's like, Brian, I love that you tried really hard, which is a great way to start. And he's like, the problem is you write like you talk. And you give too many examples, and you back up too much of your information with data and stories. So it's very nice, but we cannot have you represent our brand. We cannot have you blog. It crushed me. So from 2005 to 2013, I wrote 0 blogs. I did not write anything. It really it was really interesting times. And then I worked for a data center company based here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I started to work with some innovators, and they're like, you know what really works for us in the data center? And yes, for all those that heard data center, that sexy industry that I was working in, right? Heating, power, cooling, real estate. But they were like, you know what really works? Is people that create content that is readable as if someone was talking with me, not at me. And this goes to everything you do. If you want to be great on video, when you're explaining an example, don't tell people what to do, tell them what we need to do. We need to be better at business. We need to understand the power of direct mail. We need to be better at using our data to understand our consumer. The difference of that is what we've been doing for all these years. You need this is your problem, and I can tell you, none of us need someone telling us what's wrong and what we are doing bad. 68% of digital native B2B buyers do their research and identify solutions independent of traditional research and analyst firms. What they're looking at is they're doing their own research, though trusting those that they're connected with on social media, and they're engaging with that on a mobile device. 68% of those digital consumers that are making decisions in B2B are looking and researching on a mobile device. If your content is not mobile friendly and mobile ready, you are missing out on that research. And if you are not there and your content is not part of the things that can be served up on a mobile device, we move on. And mobile is changing that. The other piece of this, and I kind of put it out there, and part of this is me. Like, if you leave me a voicemail right now, it actually says, Thanks for calling. Just so you know, I didn't realize voicemails are still a thing. I am a pager-wearing millennial, and therefore, hang up now and send me a text with what you want to say, because I'm never going to go back and read or listen to what's going to be said on this voicemail. Like, I don't even know where the voicemail button is on my iPhone, right? Like, that's the piece here. But one of the things that we also struggle with today when it comes to these digital consumers is we have to communicate where they want to communicate if you want to get a yes. If you want the most strategic way, and I recommend everyone, in your CRM system, if you connect with somebody, put in your CRM system how they prefer to be communicated with. If they send you a Facebook message and you connect there, and you make your ask via email, what does that say to that consumer? Well, first of all, I hate email. Second of all, you're like, well, I had this great conversation. Why aren't they having that conversation with me where we already started? We have to understand that today's consumer, we must communicate with them where they are. The other piece of this is storytelling. We need to focus on telling our why as well as the customer's why. Today's consumers want to know that you're a part of something. They want to know that you care. And it's not about what you do, because here's some breaking news. What you do is boring for the most part, like what your company does. And nobody really cares about that part. We care about why you do it. What are the problems you're going to solve for our business? How are you going to make our lives easier? When you're creating content and conversations in the digital world, we have to start with that customer's why. We have to start by understanding where they move forward. The other piece of this is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Now, I used that paintball example earlier, but one of the things with the paintball example that I really love is that the paintball company was really having a hard time bridging this online-offline gap. How can we get millennials or these younger people to love what they're doing? And I got to work with them, a company based out of LA, after I spoke at the national convention. And what we decided was they're going to get some artists to paint on a wall, and they're going to make that wall Instagrammable. Now, we might laugh. We've all seen articles that say, like, today's millennials choose their travel destination. They pick which hotel based on which hotel is going to look better on Instagram. Truthfully, I think I've done that more than once. And the funny thing about that is it might sound funny to us. It might sound disconnected. But if your consumers are doing that, what are you creating? What Instagrammable moments are you creating in your brand? If you are sending someone a box to their house, make that box look so good that they have to share it on Instagram. If you have a pattern, Apple kills at this, right? Apple started this. When you open an iPhone, it is a religious experience. And my company's iSocialFanz, I'm a fanboy. But you open it, and it's like, you don't have to cut through that, that plastic that you cut your arm open for and still can't believe it's around. It's an experience, right? So how do we, in B2B, create that experience for our B2B customers? Because it's not about having a product that they're going to buy, but it's about them celebrating their conversation. It's about connecting with them and giving them something to share. Last but not least, I'm going to tell you that the field of dreams marketing is over. We've all seen this movie with Kevin Costner, and I'm a millennial. It's quoting Field of Dreams. What's the tagline? If you build it, they will come. Breaking news, 2019. If you build it, if you launch it, if you create a white paper, if you have a new account, you launch a new website, you have a new product, if you build it, nobody is coming. Nobody cares. You must go to where your audience is, have the conversation on the channels that they are at, connect with them, build trust, and inspire them to come to your content. That is the game changer. That is the difference. Field of Dreams marketing no longer works. The game is over. 57% of millennial consumers watch more video ads on social media than they do on TV. I've heard this all the time from the B2B clients that I work with. Brian, we are B2B. We are focusing our advertising not on digital, on TV, because B2B consumers don't need to see that on social media. Well, it's great that we think that, but if they're only watching social media and none of them are watching I can't even tell you the last time I watched a commercial, it wasn't a live sporting event, right? We watch on demand where we want it, when we want it. And so we must think that, we must realize that the field of dreams marketing is over. We must look beyond our current customers and understand who influences our customers to make decisions. And that goes beyond just those that we are talking about right now. Funny enough, for many of us, one of the things you want to make a decision in the B2B space, more often than not, the influence, the person that you can connect with on social media, isn't the B2B buyer that is swiping the credit card or executing the transaction or replying to the RFP. The person you're connecting with is the person that inspires and influences them to make that decision. If you are a brand and you are sponsoring or you're creating content and conversation with people that even someone's kids, and their kids are talking about a brand or a conversation or a piece of content, and you as the decision maker are deciding between two things that have the same price, more often than not, you're picking the one that you are familiar with, the one that you're listening to your kids, and that's how we move forward when it comes to understanding that. Last but not least, we saw Tim show this picture, and I firmly believe that we are greater than me. If you want to build rapport with your audience, if you want to connect, it's not about talking about yourself. It's about collaborating with others. Right now in this room, there are people in this room that you should be on breaks, you should be creating video, you should be connecting and saying, hey, how can we collaborate and create content that overlaps both of our customers? Because guess what happens? When you do that with other people, we both share that content. We now grow our audience. And let's face it, we don't want to hear from a brand on how great a brand is. We love hearing from customers and partners and businesses and saying how great they are in connecting together. Today, you can do that right there in this room. And then we heard earlier, just before this started up, we heard about the movement, from a girls in tech movement. I'm also an advisor for Girls Who Code, and I'm a big believer in the power of social good. And social good is something that we're seeing a lot right now. We saw the Gillette ads that went on. We've seen what Nike has done. But there is something to be said about having a mission, having a purpose, and having something to stand for. We are looking for great people that are doing great things today. The world has enough bad news. The world has enough fake news. The world has enough people shouting at us. Nobody likes to be marketed to. Nobody likes to be sold to. But know what we like to do? We like to be part of something great. We like to be a part of something that moves the needle. Remember, I said the future of marketing is relatability. And as we move forward, I want you to think throughout your content, throughout your conversations, how am I being more relatable? A nice trick to this, if you are in sales, or have you ever heard of a tool called BombBomb, or a tool that allows you to put video into an email? If someone's getting 30 sales pitches a day, and one of those sales pitches is someone's face sitting in front of their dirty computer talking about how much they love their product, which one are you, the consumer, going to read? The 29 that are written in the same exact tagline, because we all Googled and read the same, Michael Brenner's article is on what's the best, email newsline, whatever that may be. How do we stand out from the noise? How do we build that relatability? Because every business today is in the business of trust. The question becomes, it's not millennials, it's not generation. How do we build that trust? And I'm going to leave you with a quote. My parents are actually here in the audience. They live here in Phoenix. My dad's a sales guy. My dad owned a peanut brittle company. And I was hosting a Google Hangout about 5 years ago. And I was interviewing this thought leader named David Meerman Scott, who you guys heard yesterday. And I was interviewing him about sales and social media and how all this was powerful. And I sent my dad the link, but I don't believe he knew it was live. Sorry, Dad. And he sent me a text and he said, son, I love what you're doing in social media. I love that you're doing this in marketing and digital, but I want you to remember one thing. Everything that you're doing online, nothing that you do online will ever replace a handshake. Funny enough, I read that out loud while I read the text out to my dad, or to David Meerman Scott I was reading, and I said, you know what, my dad is right. What we do in the digital world today does not replace a handshake. It is not, if you suck offline, you will suck online. But the thing about it is you invest in it, if you start with authentic conversations and community and content, it will give you the opportunity to have more handshakes. And even take that a step further, turn handshakes into hugs, or I'm a millennial, turn those hugs into selfies. My name is Brian Fanzo. Thank you very much.